I had to do a little bit of research on this man, Mr. Rispin, and I did find out something, mate. Now, did you all know in this room that Russian caviar is no longer the top of the line in terms of caviar? No, you didn't. Ah, well, I'm going to fill you in. You'd probably do this anyway. Apparently China is now the country that if you want to get good quality, top of the line caviar, you go to China. So how amazing is that? Now I don't know how much difference that's going to make to your business, but anyway. So Craig Rispin. Well, Craig's a business futurist and innovation expert. His expertise is in emerging business, people and technology, and in particular trends, and how companies can profit from them. Craig has over 20 years experience working where the future has been created with some of the most innovative companies in the world in the IT, consumer electronics, internet and broadcasting industries. Craig's an award-winning speaker and has addressed audiences as large as 16,000 on 5 continents and consulted with CEOs of leading companies worldwide. Some of his clients include BHP Billiton, Canon, Colonial First State, IBM, Kimberly-Clark, NRMA, Sportscraft, Cinematic, Toyota, and hundreds of professional industry associations. So I'd love to introduce Craig to you as a keynote today and CEO mentor as well. So can we give Craig a big hand, please?
Did you all sleep well last night? Did you all sleep well? Did you realize while you were sleeping, the world shifted on its axis just a little bit? Did you hear the news? Did you see on your phone as you were coming in the big announcements from companies that are emerging from a new $14 trillion market that didn't exist 5 years ago? Today I want to reveal some of those to you, but I want to start by asking you another question. Put your hand up if you've met another futurist besides me in your life. Have you met another futurist? Yes? Do you remember their name? No. Well, guess what? There's a few of us around. Our peak association is the World Future Society, WFS.org. Maybe you're a futurist in disguise and would like to join us. We have 24,000 members worldwide. It was started in 1966, and in 1977, I was the world's first student member of the World Future Society. About a third of our members work for government and NGOs, a third work in academia and research, and a third work in the commercial world. That's where I come from. I'm a business futurist. But not all of the futurists that are members of the World Future Society have futurist on their card, because in some places people think, what's a futurist? You must not have a real job. And so they'll have, in Japan, strategic planning. There are hundreds and hundreds. In China, after Richard Nixon normalized relations with China, the week following, Alvin Toffler, who wrote Future Shock, and his wife Heidi, the week following, went to China and released their book, Future Shock, and it became required reading for every member of the Communist Party. To this day, there's a Department of the Future in the Chinese government, and I was over there just a few years ago addressing the staff. I said, how many staff members, how many people are going to be, that are part of this Office of the Future? And they said, not everyone won't be coming, just 3,000 of them. Do we have a Department of the Future in our government? I don't think so. I get to work with all sorts of organizations, from some of the world's biggest to networks of very small ones, through franchise organizations or business networks. I work in about 50 different industries per year. In the last 2 weeks, I've done work for skin cancer doctors, the food industry, venison and velvet from deer in New Zealand. I've worked with financial planners, lawyers, and teachers. And they're all saying the same thing to me. They're saying, Craig, come along and speak at our conference. Talk to us about the future. And during the briefing meeting, this phrase almost always comes up. The president of the Peak Association or the country manager or CEO will say something along the lines like this. Craig, I've been in this industry X number of years, say 30 years, and there's been more change in the last 3 than in the last 30. Are you going to come along and tell us that the next 3 years will be even faster change than that? And guess what I say? You have no idea. I know you can feel it in the pit of your stomach, that anxiety that you have in your organization that maybe you're not keeping up with your customers. Maybe your customers are moving faster than your organization is. Or maybe you're not keeping up personally with this massive change that's going on. If you've got that little feeling of anxiety in your tummy, that's called future shock. It's a recognized affliction. You've got it. And you have to figure out a way to deal with it. And I'm here to help you with that. And to begin the conversation, you don't know this, but you're sitting next to your learning partner. This morning, you're going to have a learning partner. If you had an odd number of people at your table for some reason, you're going to have a triumvirate of learning. Turn to your learning partners, discuss with them, what incredible things have you seen in your industry that have happened just in the last 3 years? Just in the last 3 years. You have 60 seconds to discuss. Your time begins now. So imagine, if you will, that we're all transported back in time. You're all at an event just like this, but the year is 1994. I was speaking at an event not unlike this in Sydney. And I was presenting on this brand new technology that was just emerging in 1994. You may have heard of it. It's called the World Wide Web. In 1994, the World Wide Web was a brand new thing. It'd be a couple years until Amazon set up their homepage in 1996. Be a couple more years before Google registered their trademark and went online. This was really, really early days. And I had come to Australia because I'd sold my business to Fairfax. They'd seen that we had been developing websites from some of the world's biggest companies all around the world, including newspapers with the Dallas Morning News. And so they invested in my company, brought me to Australia, and I started talking about how the world would shift. Now, in 1994, you probably didn't even have your own domain name. If you had an email address, most likely you were a university professor or student. You couldn't even register a commercial domain name until 1996. And you certainly couldn't sell anything online because we didn't have secure sockets yet. You didn't get that little lock on your browser. It wasn't until 1996 that we could do that. And at the end of the presentation, 6 business owners came up to me. And they said to me, Craig, we think this World Wide Web thing is going to be massive. We think this technology is going to change our industries, and they were all in different industries, forever. Could you come and help us, present to us in more detail once a month for 6 months and tell us about the future? Well, I have to say, last week was our last meeting. It's been 24 years and we're still talking about the future. Do you know that same group, the same group of subscribers who engaged me in 1994, we all went to California together to sit in the audience as Steve Jobs was on stage, and he pulled out of his back pocket the iPhone in 2006. And they all turned to me and said, "We think this is going to be massive." Can you help us with that? Now imagine you're back here in 2018, and I reveal to you the 8 mega technologies that will define the next 40 years. You have 2 choices at the end of my presentation. You can walk out the door and say, "That was very interesting." Or you can ask yourself instead, what does this mean to my industry? What does this mean to our organization? And what does this mean to me as a leader? And take action. So, let's get started. Here's your crash course in the next 40 years. You want to get out your smartphones because you're going to want to take some pictures of some stats and things I'm going to put on stage. But to begin with, I'm going to play a video produced by an educational futurist. An educational futurist who decided that he needed to update the parents in the school around the technologies that the students would be growing up with by the time that they graduated. And this video went viral on the internet. The Did You Know series of videos have actually been played almost 1 billion times. Put your hand up if you've seen this Did You Know video. Oh, 2 people? You 3 people? Well, now I'm really obliged to play it. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to watch this video that's going to cover the religious, social, economic, technological, political trends that are going to change in the next 10 years. It's called Did You Know in 2028. So just in 10 years' time, how different will the world look like? And at the end of it, I'm going to ask you to turn to your learning partner and ask them, what was the most surprising thing you saw in the video? You got your task? Here comes the video. Enjoy. Peril and opportunity, peril and opportunity. Right now is never a better time than to start a new business or launch a new product or service. There have been more brands direct to consumer that have gone from 0 sales to $100 million in sales in less than 3 years. More companies have done this. Hundreds of companies have done this. Best time to start a new enterprise. And if you're the incumbent, it's the time of greatest risk. Peril and opportunity at the same time. In the future, you're going to have to get used to dealing with paradox. Two things will be true at the same time, and I don't mean fake news. Turn to your learning partner, discuss with them what was the most surprising thing they saw in the video. You have 60 seconds again, your time begins now. Pop your hand up. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to do a little test. Were you actually listening to your learning partner, or were you thinking about what you were going to say? Put your hand up if you would like to share what your learning partner thought was the most surprising thing in the video. Somebody from this table, please. Yes, thank you.
The one that less raised was that Islam would be the most populous religion.
Yes, isn't that surprising? Did you know that? And you know who tracks this is that there is over the flow of religion and also language is tracked by 100 futurists that are employed full-time at the United Nations.
Can I add one to that?
Yes, please.
The most popular name in Great Britain, Muhammad.
How about somebody from this table? Yes.
Like the 34-year-old average Indian will be the male of the average person.
Yes, incredible, isn't it? And this table? Eliminated by AI, yes. But here's the interesting thing. Everybody's worried around technology reducing jobs. But actually, it's just going to transform them completely. Here's the good news. Two things at the same time. 50% of jobs will be reduced through AI. I'll give you an example of this with one of my clients. I come to Melbourne every month because I'm on contract with NAB. I don't know if you've heard, they've let 6,000 employees go. Do you know how they're going to replace the 6,000 employees? With an algorithm. Are they ever going to have an audit problem anymore? No, in fact, this agent will go through their accounts and automatically identify if any fraudulent activity happens in real time, not in post reports. It's an agent doing an audit in real time. So, this table over here. See anything surprising?
Yeah, one that I didn't quite understand as well was the entire content of the internet can be stored on DNA.
Yes, how is that possible? That the entire content of the internet could be stored on DNA? There's far too many cat videos. So, being a futurist, I trust my friends at the United Nations and the World Future Society who come up with these facts, but I always verify to see if they're true. And when I saw this, I thought to myself, I know a lot about data storage. The Data Storage Association, people who run data centers, are a client of mine. And they'd be really interested in this because they spend millions of dollars cooling their very expensive disk servers that run in their data centers. So I went looking to see if this was true. And I ran into this little startup. I love the name of this little startup because you know DNA is a spiral. And so the name of this startup is called Twist. And guess who their investors are? Their investors are Faga. Faga? You haven't heard of Faga? Who is Faga? Do you know who Faga is? Facebook, Amazon, Google, and Apple have all invested in this startup who says that a single little gram, that's it just there, that little pink smear, take out your hand, look at your little fingernail, surface area of your little fingernail of this material would be about 1 gram. A single gram of this material could store 1 billion terabyte drives. If you buy a laptop now, it's a gaming laptop, it comes with a terabyte drive. This is 1 billion of those. Turn to the person next to you and say, I think you may have been sleeping, and grab their shoulder and wake them up. Microsoft has already invested in this company as well. They're buying 10 million molecules of this custom DNA. So in fact, it is true. And if you'd like to know more about this, you can read more about this in this book that I've been recommending to every executive I meet since 2012. The book is called Abundance by Peter Diamandis, The Future is Better Than You Think, that covers the 8 exponential technologies that will impact our world for the next 40 years and the world's biggest problems and how those problems will be solved through this exponential technology. Now, if you don't know about who Peter Diamandis is, he's the guy who set up the X Prize that spurred on the private space race that we're part of right now. That was 10 years ago. Most recently, the X Prize gave away a prize for the tricorder. They replicated many of the functions of the Star Trek tricorder in this latest competition. And there are 2 bills that made this the required reading for all of their followers, including this Bill. His name's Bill Clinton, and he runs the Clinton Global Foundation, and he sent a copy of this book to all of his executives. And there's another Bill, and his initials are BG. Which Bill is this? Bill Gates. And why do they call him BG now? They call him Bill BG now because it's covered in the book as well. He's a techno-philanthropist, the biggest giver in the world. He decided that he was going to give away all of his wealth, $20 billion, and Warren Buffett said, would you like another $20 billion? He is now the biggest giver. I'll give you another example. One of my clients recently reached down the back of the seat cushions to see if they could find some spare change. You know, like you do on your lounge suite or in your car, and you're like, oh, look, I found a 5. You don't ever do that? Well, my client did this, and they went, oh, look, we found $36 billion. And what we're going to do is give it into medical research to benefit mankind in the future. What's this company called? Google is giving $36 billion worth of research to us for free, and almost nobody's talking about it. Get out your smartphones. These are the 8 exponential technologies covered in Abundance. They are, number 1, infinite computing. We just talked about that with the customized DNA. Sensors and networks, robotics, 3D printing, synthetic biology, digital medicine, nanomaterials. I'm ready for my close-up. Did you get it? Did you get it? And sorry, I don't have my wireless mic on. And these 8 exponential technologies are driving this shift to the 4th industrial revolution, a $14 trillion market now that did not exist 3 years ago. As of this morning, I was just Googling it this morning, those technologies are driving this new industry that we call the startups. And this morning, there are 170 of them valued at more than $1 billion. Put your hand up if your organization is valued at more than $1 billion. Oh, 20 billion, 40 billion, 100 billion. About that. There are some on this list that soon will be valued at $100 billion, and they haven't even listed yet. If you go onto the Wall Street Journal, you can find this list that's called the $1 Billion Startup Club. There's the number. Here's the complete list. Can you see it in the back there? Can you make that out? Can you see that? It's a long list. Let me zoom into it so you can see it. At the top is the usual suspect, Uber. There's a new boss in town, and he's really remaking Uber. Number 2 is Didi. Who is Didi? Anyone? Didi is the Uber of China. They took their model, they ran the Uber model in China. When Uber went to China, they struggled. Now they have an investment in each other. If you put those 2 companies together and decide to list, would you have a $100 billion company before you listed? You definitely would. But by the way, DK, as they call him at Uber, the new CEO, says that Uber alone will be $100 billion soon, and then they'll list. And this is just ridiculous to me. because I used to work for Steve Jobs in the 1980s, and you know what he said to us in the 1980s? Let's get to 100 million. Let's get to 100 million, and then we'll list. It's $100 billion now for businesses that could not exist a few years ago. Last night, I was going to stay here in the Crown Hotel, but the rates were really quite exorbitant compared to the 52-story building just across the street. So I hopped onto Airbnb and I looked it up, and you wouldn't believe. Do you know what my apartment cost last night on the 41st floor of the Palladium Tower? $51. Just saying. SpaceX is now doing, I'll tell you why now is the best time to start a new business or start a new enterprise or launch a new product. Because now individuals can do what companies used to do. Companies can now do what countries used to do. SpaceX is doing what NASA could never do. Just think about this. An incredible time to be alive. And as you go down the list, you discover all these companies that pop up that didn't have a business model until we sold 1 billion smartphones or more. DJI is was one of those, valued at now $10 billion. Who is DJI? They make drones, that's right. And it's because we shipped phones that have tilt sensors and accelerometers and GPS, and we ship billions of those, the price of the chips have come down so much that you can put them into toys, expensive toys essentially. But it's not only toys. One of my clients is BHP, and one of the titles I have in their organization now, I was telling year 6 boys about this. I said, who would like to be a drone wrangler for BHP? And they run these industrial scale DJI drones across their gas pipelines, and they have an infrared camera and they can see whether the gas is leaking. Incredible. These cameras are, as they're flying along at about 35 kilometers per hour, can scan these pipes, and the resolution is so high, you can see the bolts on the pipeline. It's incredible to see. The resolution is 5 millimeters as it's flying 35 kilometers per hour. The list keeps on going on, but look, this is the world that we're living in now. This is a $14 trillion worth of value that has been created. I work with all the big accounting firms. You know what they're asking me? Craig, we used to value companies based on the assets that they control. We cannot value companies on that anymore because companies that have no assets are more valuable than ones that do have assets. Uber, the world's largest transportation company, I need to update this slide, owns no vehicles. No, they have 10 vehicles and they're self-driving vehicles. And their number one cost at Uber is the bag of meat in the front seat that's driving the car. They can't wait to get rid of that, and you know it's coming fast. But Uber, valued more than GM, Ford, and Honda, and they did it in just 5 years. Airbnb is the world's largest what? Accommodation provider. Last night, I looked it up. There were 4 million people, 4 million hosts hosting people in rooms all around the world. 4 million. Do you know of a hotel chain that has 4 million rooms? Marriott does not. That's why Marriott has figured out, by getting into the home rental business, that they, because they're an incumbent, have to become Airbnb before Airbnb becomes them. And in America, if you get a loan now, you don't get it from Wells Fargo, you probably get it from Quicken Loans, also known as Rocket Mortgage. You can be standing in the home, you can log in with your device, and in 8 minutes they'll approve you for your loan. And you know how what risk profile they use to see whether to give you the loan? They look at your bank account, and then they scan your social media profile for risky behavior. Just saying. Put your hand up if you use Netflix in your home. Just look around the room. Goodbye, Foxtel. And it's not just them. No matter what industry I go into, and like I said, I work in 50 different industries, I could put in, I don't know, industrial distribution, and there'll be hundreds or thousands of startups that are looking to disrupt the incumbents. Or this could be a list of startups that you could collaborate with to transform your organization. It's all in your head. They could be your competitor or your collaborator. So to bring this all together, there's so much more I would love to share with you. I have 889 more slides in this deck and a limited time, 3 minutes and 15 seconds. I want to give you something that's practical, useful, that you can take away, some technology you could apply to transform your organization. And here's the idea. I'm working with a transport organization that used to be called Patrick's. They're not called Patrick's anymore, they're called Lynx. And they've sold off all of their assets that they don't want anymore, and they're focusing on their core business. And I've helped them reframe their strategy. This is what the CEO is now repeating again and again and again to his staff. We have a 100-year-old history, but we're behaving like a 100-year-old startup. We've got 100 years of history, but we're behaving like a 100-year-old startup. And it's completely transformed their organization. Like this. Wouldn't it be nice if somebody published a book and it analyzed why these organizations that have no assets are growing 10 times faster than you? And wouldn't it be great if somebody wrote a book like that? Guess what? Somebody did. A fellow futurist friend of mine wrote this book, Exponential Organizations, Why New Organizations Are 10 Times Better, Faster, and Cheaper Than Yours, and What to Do About It. And in the book, it actually shows you the mindset that startups have, the organizational plan that's different from yours. I don't know what your org chart looks like, but the org chart that he spells out in this book, Salam Ismail, one of the members of the World Future Society for about 30 years, he says this is the way they think. This is the picture you want to take. This is their game plan. This is how they think when they're forming their organization. Over the top, they have an MTP. What's an MTP? Massively transformational purpose. Everybody thinks that Uber was set up to disrupt the taxi industry, but if you look at their massive transformational purpose, it was because the original founders could not get a taxi to pick them up in their area because the taxis didn't like to go that area because people don't have a lot of money. So they were really ticked off that these taxis wouldn't turn up, and they decided to do some investigation, and they found vast amounts of corruption in the taxi industry worldwide. So their massive transformational purpose when they started was to root out corruption in the taxi industry worldwide. That was a pretty effective idea. And then they started getting staff on demand. Recently, a Uber driver showed me, hey, he said, do you know anybody who'd like to drive an Uber? I said, why? And he said, well, we need more drivers in Melbourne. There's a $750 spiff. Like, I get $750 if I refer somebody with my code. If you know somebody, I'll split it with you. I said, has this pitch worked? He goes, oh, here, I'll show you on my app. He had made $15,000 by referring his friends to drive on Uber. This is how they get staff on demand. This is how you get your staff, right? Many of my clients do. They use the community and crowd to do their design. They use algorithms to make decisions. They have leveraged assets. They're investing 10% in their assets compared to you. You're investing 100%. And they have massive engagement. I'll give you an idea. The average engagement in an average business here in Melbourne, I looked at the numbers. You know what the engagement level is? Wayne, do you know what the engagement level is for employees in Victoria?
We have 30% in terms of proactively engaged.
Yeah, would I surprise you if I told you it was 15%? So that's 85% of employees turned up unengaged. In fact, a big percentage of them are turning up and sabotaging your organization because they're so pissed off. Do you know what the engagement level is when Elon Musk stands on stage in front of 7,000 SpaceX employees, half of which used to work for NASA, and says, "We're frickin' going to Mars"? What do you think the engagement level is? 15%? On the left-hand side, we've got interfaces, dashboards. You walk into many of my clients' lobbies, they have dashboards up. They see their net promoter score live on a screen in their lobby. Wow, that's brave to show something like that on screen in real time. They're doing rapid experiments every week. I run these programs where in 5 days, they're called a sprint. Google uses it with all their startups. In 5 days, we identify a problem. We do some thinking about how to solve that problem. We engage some experts to consult with us. We build a prototype on a Thursday, and on Friday, we show it to 10 customers, and we have a new product in a week. This is how you do your planning, right? And the funny thing is, you think I'm making this up. This is the new state of the world. This is your new competition or your new collaborators. You just have to make a decision. So the last resource I'll share with you is a resource that all the startups use, which is a list of the tools that they use in their business that you probably don't use in your business. And the website is called Startup Stash. And at Startup Stash, it's blocked into categories, and under each of those categories are 3 or 4 websites that are the most common that are used under that section by the startups. And if you go to communication, the #1 app listed under communication is also the #1 fastest growing startup talked about in exponential organizations. This app that eliminates, on average, 50% of internal emails. Who would like to reduce their internal email hours by 50%? Let me ask this again. Put your hand up if you'd like to yeah, of course you would. And the app is called, they got to $1 billion valuation in only 15 months. The app is called Slack. Slack. And every startup I know uses Slack instead of email. Do you? Turn to your learning partner, ask them. Wake up and use Slack. Shake them on the shoulder. This is just the start of the conversation. Hopefully it's not the end of the conversation. I'd love to share so much more with you. People ask me all the time, Craig, how can we work with you more in the future? If you'd like somebody to speak at a conference like this, I do this 130 times in a year on average. If you'd like me to come speak to your group, talk to me. I also run a monthly mentoring group here in Melbourne on the second Friday of every month. So it's today at lunchtime. It's out in Abbotsford. Been running that for 3 years. You are invited as my guest. It's on my website. Just Google me, you'll find it. You can come to your first session free of charge, no obligation. Mentoring group, second Friday of the month. It's on my website. I run global advisory boards where I bring in experts, including 24,000 futurists and 50,000 network of consultants to advise my customers globally. And I don't know how you do your corporate planning, but I use an algorithm that scans 40 billion web pages to find out what's happening in your industry in 24 hours. And then I ask 24,000 friends to help me with your planning. If you'd like some help with that, see me afterwards. I'd love, love, love to serve you so you can compete in the future. Thank you very much.
Oh boy, I'm exhausted. Well, I think the thing that really that hit me was the fact that these things happen when people are ticked off.
Yes.
Because I remember the story about Airbnb. which started with a couple of uni students, I think, and they couldn't pay their rent. And so they said, well, how about we just buy a mattress and we'll put it on our floor and we'll just put a thing down at the supermarket. And they bought 2 mattresses, air mattresses, and they booked them straight away. I said, well, this is a good idea. So they just kept on doing it. Now that is, what's that worth now?
$30 billion.
It's not bad, is it? So they've invested, I don't know, $30 to buy a couple of air mattresses. Now they're worth $30 billion because they were ticked off and they just decided to do something about it.
Yes, it's interesting. Both of those startups, Uber and Airbnb, were started within weeks of one another, right after a major event in history, the inauguration of Obama.
Okay.
And they're saying that whenever there's a big shift in the economy or in the psyche in the nation, it's when these startups emerge.
Wow. So are you saying because of the current president of the United States that there's a lot of people ticked off?
There's a lot more startups now than ever before.
Yeah.
The venture capitalists are saying they're getting hundreds of thousands of business plans on a regular basis now.
Right.
And I think that, yeah, there's a lot of ticked off people.
Good stuff. Listen, we've got a few minutes for some questions, so would anyone like to ask some questions while Craig's up here?
Pass me that while we do that. Stunned into silence. First question's free, next one's $10,000. Yeah.
Richard.
All of those things that you're talking about are mostly technological changes and to business. Can you throw some light on what would be the change for the human being?
Yes. Okay. So the next book that I was going to recommend to you, if I had time, was written by Professor Schwab, who created the World Economic Forum 40 years ago. It's called the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Do you know what the first 3 were? What's the first 3? The first one was steam power. The next one was electrification. The third one was computers and communication. And the fourth industrial revolution will transform our economy. But he says in this book, and most of my futurist friends agree, the biggest shift in this fourth industrial revolution is not that just our economy or technology is changing, is that in this fourth industrial revolution, you and me will be changed physically and mentally. Do you believe this? I believe it. My daughter's 21 years old right now. She's in her 5th year of a bioinformatics, biomedical engineering degree at UNSW. When she was 19, she entered into this competition called Biomods. Biomods. Look it up on YouTube. Her team was called Team Tiny Trap. Look it up on YouTube. They designed on a 3D genetic printer a nanobox that captured a cancer drug in a box by using a bit of DNA and twisting it so it made a spring, had a little catch on it, and when this drug came across, it snapped shut and captured the cancer drug so it could be delivered straight to the cancer and not damage the rest of your body. So I say to my business leaders, my daughter had access when she was 19 years old to a 3D bioprinter. What kind of printer did you have when you went to school? So, in the last industrial revolution, we gained power over ones and zeros, computer code. In this new industrial revolution, we will have power over life code, and it's going to change everything. Don't you think? I think so.